everyone for coming. I apologize that I wasn't able to be here yesterday, but I was glad to see that Aaron Welty from our office was here with Ben and Jay. My name is Joel Lonizak. I'm the Downtown Design Specialist with the Wisconsin Main Street Program. And one of the things that I'm always proud of that we can provide our Main Street communities is what's called a technical assistance visit, and which is exactly like this. And I would say over the years that we've been doing this and providing these types of visits, I would say branding is probably about 60% of the time what communities ask for, what they need. And it's so much more than a logo and a tagline and things like that. It's really taking a look at your whole community, especially in a community like Wausau where you have a distinct, I wouldn't say distinct, but you have a west side, an east side, and things like that, and different organizations. And that's one of the things that I always love seeing Ben work on, is trying to pull all of those elements together. And I said the other day that he has a really good knack of being able to be in a community for less than 24 hours and see things that I've been to Wausau 50 times probably, and I guarantee he saw things that I've never seen. He's seen things that maybe some of you who've lived here your whole life have never seen. So it's always a pleasure and a joy to see what he comes up with. So with that, I will turn it over to Jay and to Ben.
Awesome. Jay, you got anything?
No, just thank you all for coming and joining us. No, it's your show.
All right.
You run.
Well, and just to reinforce, the overall purpose of the tech visit was a focus on branding with a particular focus on what I will call for now the near west side, which I made some observations yesterday about how that is a identity that is fraught with like modifier on top of modifier. And so we definitely want to dig into that a little bit as we go through. I've got a lot of stuff to share with you today. I'm going a little outside of my scope just because I understand that with the district, we've got a 2009 master plan that was done. We've got some fantastic renderings that I came across that Joe did back in 2012. So I integrated some of that stuff in just so that we can take a little bit of the energy that we have wrapping our arms around the district, and hopefully that helps to kind of drive additional conversation about some of the main redevelopment property there and some reconfiguration of some of the stuff that's going on over there. So I'm just going to jump right in. I always like to start by looking at the things that exist. So you see a series of logos. You're familiar with all these, I'm sure. Across the top, we've got city-side logos. The city has done a really great job. If I'm tracking the history right, it looks as though the development department contracted and developed the multicolored logo, and then as it started to be deployed, people realized it was fresh, it was clean, it was easy to use, so it was adopted citywide. And then with programs like Live It Up Wausau, you see that brand system has started to expand. And then even seeing things like the Wausau Area Access Media, where they did something kind of interesting there, where they pulled colors from the citywide identity and then pulled the icon from Marathon County. So they're like, hey, we're playing with everybody with that. We've got Wausau River District, which is a logo that's been around a while and has gone through one revision already, and I'll talk a little bit about it. We've got the Wausau Events, which is actually very, very complementary to the Wausau River District. It's kind of nice that those two sister organizations share space. They're very, very congruent in terms of their design. And then you have the Go West Wausau West Side Business Association, which is not the west side that we know and love, but the far west side, or the mid-far west side, or the central, mid-northeastern west side. I don't know. So those are all the dynamics that are kind of in play already. One of the things I always like to reinforce with you all is one of these observations of, the River District really is a Main Street organization that is focused on the core of the community. Those organizations share the same 5 audiences. And the message that they bring to the table is a little bit different based off what it is that they're doing and who they're talking to. So you've got donors, anybody who might be supporting the organization financially, sponsors, donators, members, investors, even all the way down the road to planned giving. Owners, that's your building owners, your business owners, property owners, developers, prospects. Your public, this is the area where most Main Street spend the majority of their time. That's our customers, our citizens, and our event goers. Then we've got our volunteers. Volunteers never met a Main Street that said they had enough. But, we in that particular area, we have some really good conversations. We always like to ask the executive director, what kind of board do you have? What kind of board do you want? And what kind of board does the board think it is? And generally, an executive director wants a working board, and the board considers themselves advisory. I was selected for this board because I am so intelligent that my role is to tell you all the things that you should be doing until we meet next time. So, that's one of those things that's kind of a typical dynamic. I think that here you've got a board that brings a tremendous amount of what we call influence and affluence, the credibility to the organization and the connections that they need to be able to make things happen. And then that final category is government, that relationship between the Main Street organization and the city government, the county government, and all those quasi-governmental bodies, your chambers and CVBs and things like that. So that's just kind of a base level knowledge. I'm going to share with Blake some tools that will maybe help him go through an exercise with the board where you can talk about what the motivators of each of those audiences are. So I think that this is a very much a precursor to a bigger conversation for you all. So then from there, the next thing that I always like to look at is the components of the brand system. And one of the first times ever, I was able to walk into the Main Street office, and Blake picked up off of Tiffany's desk a little sheet that defined all the colors of the brand system. So right now, you can't really see there's a cream color that exists between the orange and yellow, but they had 6 defined colors. They knew exactly how to make those colors, and I am a big believer that you don't change something that's not broken. So, you've got your colors, they're thought out, they provide a sense of vibrancy, and we were able to kind of preserve that and reinforce that. The second thing that I did was I went through the River District logo, dissected it, and was able to identify what the actual typefaces were that made the logo. So the logo is technically 2 different typefaces. It's called Universe and Freehand. Freehand is the script, and then Universe has a condensed version and then an extended version. I have collected and given you the full families of both of those. The Universe actually has a giant family, everything from regular spacing to really ultra stretched to ultra condensed. And so being able to have all those variations of the same family allows you to have a lot of different looks within the same voice. So that I think will be very helpful. And then the Freehand is kind of an interesting family as well, because it's a family of several different different scripts. This particular one is called Freehand 575B. So we were able to match it perfectly and then be able to kind of give you the tool so you can use it to repeat and connect the dots. From there, we looked at the brand evolution. This is probably one of the most subtle evolutions I've ever seen in an existing brand system, where we decided to go from a martini glass to a wine glass. I can only imagine the conversation that went around an evolution like that. Do what?
It's the exhibitor.
Yeah.
It's an event that they have for very long.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So the other thing that was really nice about that evolution, popping the saxophone smaller, being able to have Wausau featured larger in that. But one of the big things, well, actually, there were a couple observations that I made when I first looked at this. The first thing that I asked Blake was, what are those shapes behind the icons? And, are they just kind of random? Are they meant to be buildings? Or the thing that I actually said is, are they intended to be kind of a stylized letter W? And Blake was like, I don't know that I ever really looked at it that way or thought about it that way. So I don't know. I wasn't there for the development, but I do think that that's kind of interesting. But when we dig into the logo itself, one of the big things that jumped out to me was, I like it. I think it's vibrant. It's got some activity to it. But if it is the only tool that you have, I could see where it would be hard to use. And when you start to look at the design, I always think about there's something that we want our graphic identity to say, and how does that relate to the overall composition of the logo? So the Wausau River District makes up about 3.5 times the composition height of the whole logo. Well, that can kind of be a drag sometimes when you got to shove it down into a corner. So what I did was, to me, the first step to make this system expandable was really to back out and create a tool that allowed you to be a little simpler when you needed to be. So what I did is I simply rolled that back. I replicated the shape so that it gave me that opportunity to have a space for Wausau to live in. And then I also created a stacked version of it. So now you've got one that runs more vertical as well as horizontal. This doesn't dilute the brand in any way, shape, or form. It actually just gives you an additional tool. You could imagine where having that vertical version in a social media icon might be able to bring that name out a lot more when it shrinks down so small. And then from there, once you have those new tools, you can explore having those one color versions of all of that. Okay, so literally all those tools, it allows you to maybe customize your look a little bit more based off your topic or as you go through the course of the year. Something else that jumped out to me, and it very much struck me last week as we were sitting in Seattle watching the community celebrated in front of Main Streeters from across the country. The canopy of umbrellas to me was unbelievably just intriguing and magical. So one of the things I'd love for you to consider is figuring out a way to integrate that component, even though it's seasonal and it's only around for about half the year. How do you integrate that into your messaging? So what I did was I created a pattern set that allows you to kind of make this subtle gesture to this column. And what I actually did is, I know that these aren't even up yet for the year, but I'm giving you the graphic, and then I created a couple different versions of the graphic. I created a Valentine's variant where it goes reds and pinks, a St. Patty's variant where it goes shades of green. So just to give you the idea of how you can play around with this in multiple components and configurations. Now, to me, this next slide is where it starts to get fun. Once you simplify it down, you give yourself permission to not always be stuck with the wine glass, saxophone, and coat hanger all the time. How do you take the brand and directly connect it with particular interests that are growing throughout the whole district? So what I'm showing is a series of expandable icons that allow you to literally drop infinitely expandable graphics as you go through, like whether we're putting a skein of yarn back there, for a needle shop, like you have all those different opportunities to literally grow it as you need to. But it's all reinforcing that identity of the river district and the things that exist there. Now, the next thing that I wanted to throw your way, and I'm still a little on the fence, I think that this is valuable, but I don't want it to be confusing. I love how the city has used their logo. I love how it's present throughout the downtown. I love the multicolor letters that make up Wausau. I love the fact that, and I'm sure that it was intentional, I love the fact that in Wausau, the U, S, and A are blue, red, and, almost white. So they kind of have that kind of patriotic nod inside the identity. So what I wanted to do was see if we could just create a variation that allowed us to bridge that gap. So this is just a way for us to kind of harken back to that downtown identity. We did hear loud and clear yesterday that locals still very much refer to the place as downtown. So you have this kind of downtown identity. This might be an interesting way where you can bridge that gap from a messaging standpoint between what the city looks like and what the city's saying and the district that you're promoting. So from a composition standpoint, you can kind of see how that starts to come together in a composition that feels fresh and clean. Now, from there, the other thing that I noticed obviously we're looking at this whole district on the near west side, but then we also have significant investment going on around river life. We have this interesting dynamic. I know we're in an off year for Whitewater Park this year, but you come into downtown and see this great kayaking sculpture. You've got farmers markets right on the riverside, all that kind of stuff. Then you also have this absolutely stunning civic place that is a square, an amphitheater, like it is a town square in its truest form. So I did want to throw out the idea, and please don't treat any of these as being set in stone, but being able to have an expandable system that allows you to wrap your arms around future growth districts so that the concept of downtown can really have hazy market-driven borders. What I'm doing is I'm just showing how you can take that simple concept. You've got City Square, which is amazing. You've got River Life, and I understand that River Life as a development has its own logo, and I get it, and I understand what that's doing. But being able to simply also have a modifier that connects it in to the downtown as a whole is really important. And then after thoughtful consideration, the name that I finally landed on is River West. And I want to dig into that because this is where we lead into this conversation about the district itself. You have a lot of different things going on with this district. First of all, it is a gateway to downtown. We know that the overwhelming majority of people coming into downtown are traveling from the west to the east. They're traveling through. We heard yesterday that right now the community is separated by the river. We know that we want to convert that. Alfred said turn it into a ribbon instead of a wall, and I love that. But we also know that there's a West Side Business Association. There's an identity that's based around the West Side, and that identity is shaped by several different things. One, there's a more traditional retail commercial concentration right around the highway. There's West Side High School, which ties into identity. And those are the things that start to kind of shape the fact that this really isn't West Side. That's why this modifier of near West Side was the thing that was the best way to describe it, and it's like, I don't really know. If we are proud of the River District, then the River West clearly shows and makes that river the ribbon. And it's a simple solution. I will tell you, I make this recommendation with hesitation. Not strategic hesitation, because I think it's the right answer, but I'm always very, very hesitant when there is a gap between what we probably should be saying and what the locals say organically. But I just think that the identity of West Side it means too much for this small district to garner the meaning that it needs. We see the opportunity as being tremendous. We see the opportunity of new development there. As we look at the overall district, we heard some folks talking yesterday about parking and parking being a problem. And this is kind of an overhead. This shows first, second, third, and shows us up to Elm, right? Just about. And if you look at this map and then you look at the buildings versus the asphalt, you're definitely asphalt heavy. There was a master plan that was done in 2009. The master plan particularly focused on this particular block between 1st and 2nd, with just north of Stewart. We talked about this yesterday with the giant C of the world's largest cul-de-sac, which is now used in one of the most creative ways as a circular parallel park in 2 rows with an inner circle and outer circle. It's pretty stunning what folks are doing there. Concrete is the asphalt's remarkably wide. In their plan, what they were showing kind of reinforcing this line and turning all of those triangle lots into what they called town square. I think that the idea of urban planning has probably changed a little bit in the past decade, and they realized that a quote town square is not really going to be what you're going to end up with right next to Stewart. And in addition to that, when you have a community that literally right across the river probably has one of the most well-designed and programmed town squares, it's a redundancy that maybe doesn't need to exist. So the only thing that I want to talk about from a physical standpoint is you have a couple dynamics here where when you look at Stewart, reclaiming this but getting rid of the cul-de-sac makes a lot of sense. You have a dynamic here where you've painted a mural on the side of the building, and typically communities frown upon building buildings where they cover up murals. That being said, you also have this edge that right now is not being reinforced at all. So when you think about buildings and how buildings fit into this space, having buildings that reinforce this edge but also engage these roads, having this road dead end to a building that kind of terminates that vista, having access here and eliminating this garage so this becomes a centralized parking space, you end up gaining, you have about 70 some odd parking spaces that exist all in this while still having very much an urban design feel. So again, this is so far outside the scope, but this is fuel for you to carry that conversation on, because that's what the group really dug into yesterday. So we're going to give you some pictures to fuel that conversation and talk more. But what we really wanted to do was focus in on the message itself and introducing people to River West. And we want to introduce them to a different side of downtown. And that's really what River West represents. It presents this opportunity to be a different place, a place apart that is part of the market-driven demand for downtown. It gives us an opportunity to kind of tie that in to the overall logo system, but then also have this clean icon that can kind of be theirs. This, as you can see, this is the rendering that was done from that 2009 plan. Here it shows the long-term redevelopment of the East Bay Shopping Center into extending the street grid and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, you can do a lot without having to build giant buildings. You know, being able to get message and consistent kind of approach to how we want to operate as a district is one of the biggest things. And that's what you can do once you have this consistent message. This is another photo rendering that came out of 2009, and it just reinforces the idea of being able to do some urban infill so you start to have some edge. I know that everybody's concerned about parking, but there's plenty of asphalt to reconfigure. Part of the reason that there's such a parking problem is because literally anybody can park in any kind of pothole that seems large enough to fit their car in, you know. So the reconfiguring consolidation of the space, I think, goes a long way. So then from there, we also step back and we look at brand extension as a whole. Now that we have these components, we've shown how we can tie districts into this overall River District brand. We also want to make sure that we're wrapping our arms around different amenities and events that go on throughout the entire district. So one of the first things that struck me, and I know that this is not something that the River District owns, but they very clearly point people to it on their website, it's the digital concierge. So, you know, being able to have little ways that you can brand those components and those experiences. Talked about this great event. You know, now all of a sudden you can tie your events in using some of those graphic cues, using some of the typefaces. But this is the place where you can break out of the color palettes. You can give yourself a little more freedom to be creative. But you can see this is an event that's very much focused on the east side of the river. But when we do events that are on the west side of the river, we're very much leaning on that west, the River West color palette. We're leaning on those things that help to identify when the events exist over in this district. You've got this great series, Dining Week, that runs through town. So being able to have a logo that represents that, but then also being able to create those cool stylized variations when you do themes like Seafood Week. Heart of Wausau, which looks like a really just great opportunity for people to talk about the community that they love. Jazz on the River. So again, you're starting to see that once you've got this system in play, you're allowed to go through and connect those dots while still kind of paying attention to the personalities of the events as they go. Merchandise that folks can tie into. Businesses should be able to profit off of people's affinity for the district. And I think a lot of times one of the things that was so hard was if the only logo that you have is the River District logo, then you might not necessarily want people taking that and just printing shirts, because now all of a sudden, does that make that person look like a volunteer for your organization when they're, maybe had too much at a downtown bar? So being thoughtful of how that merchandise rolls out, being able to create things that people like and want to be connected with. I loved the shirt that we saw in the video last week, being able to have those opportunities for people to really expand and grow and do things that are market driven, that consumers want to have and want to connect with. So that was pretty quick in terms of talking about the ideas, but then also ideas are fine, but how do they turn into tools that people can use? So what you're going to get out of this process is you're going to get a comprehensive brand toolkit. The toolkit is going to start with a style guide document. The style guide document defines all those typefaces, defines all those colors, talks about how to use it, how not to use it. Every single logo that I created becomes yours. It's all referenced in the back with a comprehensive logo contact sheet where you can go through and you can get directly to the file that you need. It will include a brand launch strategy guide, which this is not I think a lot of times people think that there's some sort of magical order. The order is the order that makes sense for you, but there is a comprehensive list that you want to achieve at some point. There's a brand score sheet. This allows you to kind of gauge how well you've done from this point and what the low-hanging fruit might be. There is a how to be a brand partner partnering sheet, and this one pager gives event organizers and businesses in the district opportunities for them to know how they might be able to take these tools and integrate them and use them. So what you're going to receive is you're going to receive a link to this tool package. It's going to have the files like this. So literally that brand partner one pager, the brand touch is the style guide that's got everything all in it. The collateral, which is the shirts and hats and stuff, color definitions, all the fonts. Then in the logo resources, every logo, there were 320 different logo files that we saved because we saved them in 5 different file formats. Any photos that we might have taken, copies of the presentations, and then all of the files for the style guide itself. And all of that stuff is live right now, and you can get it from this web address. Kind of feel like Steve Jobs when I say that. And it's available today. So that's what I was able to work on since yesterday. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear kind of the overall, does this make sense? Does the way that this River West district relates to downtown and relates to the organization and there was a lot of talk yesterday about kind of the physical, what should the city be doing and what should the individual property owners be doing. But to be completely honest, the first thing that has to happen is the district has to become a district. The voice needs to become one voice so that the vision can actually be a shared vision, and therefore the partners can work in concert to realize that vision. So, Mayor?
I know we talked about this yesterday morning at the presentation, as far as some people sharing ideas. Curious, what are you saying about the city as far as environment?
I think that the biggest thing is there's obviously work that's been done. There's streetscape work that's been done, but there are a lot of factors over in the west side that are frustrating to property owners. I would say that right now the overall sentiment in the relationship with the city is a positive one in terms of it is a relationship that is evolving and with a positive spin. So I think that's a good thing. But I also think that typically when you have a district like River West, you have a couple of very big property owners. You have tenants that are very controlling of the way that parking resources are utilized. And what you end up doing is right now, the reason that the district has come together is a shared sense of being overlooked instead of a shared optimism for their future. Does that make sense? So, you know, one of the big things that we wanted to come out of the resource visit was a shift into, hey, we're in this together, and we're excited about what this district could be, because yeah, absolutely.
I'm super pumped about this.
Awesome.
It makes me really happy. I love that you created something that's flexible. I can tell you what, like, something that's gonna happen once this is out is I can see our neighbors on the southeast side being like, I want that logo and I want those signs everywhere.
Right.
That's what's gonna happen. But this is awesome, and I love how you kind of empowered kind of the little different niches, like on that seafood stuff, and volleyball. I think there's opportunity for River West. It's just little duh things.
Well, good. I'm glad you thought that, because I always get really nervous with naming, because it's really easy in 2019 for a name suggestion to sound like some sort of random shopping center. And that's not as much a problem on a district side as it is the fact that we've got so many shopping centers that they kind of name things the same way. But it takes the amenity that we've used to be the identity of the district, and it gives us that way to stitch together and show that there are two sides of this river that are worthy of exploration. So thank you. That means a lot.
Thing to do.
Great.
River West. Yes.
Well, and one of the things that I started thinking about, and we drove up into the little into one of the little islands, and we were kind of talking about the different dynamics there. And I don't know, is there a way by foot for you to get you can cross the river by foot, but you can't cross the river and hit all the islands, can you? Or can you?
No.
Okay. Because I was sitting there, I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could do like almost like an island hopper 5K where, you know, you're doing a race and kind of getting people through there. We heard a little bit about the islands and how the islands should be an amenity, should be an asset to the downtown, but currently serve as a liability. And I think the mayor hit on that very clearly yesterday, where it's like this is one of those situations where you acknowledge the problem, but it's also not the kind of problem that just has a simple solution. So the first thing you have to do is kind of figure out ways that you can proactively activate things, because activation and vibrancy is one of the best deterrents to places that feel uncomfortable or unsafe. So the best way for you to tackle it is by activating it. That's what I was thinking. It was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could have some sort of race where you ended up kind of hitting all the way through these islands. So
I'm trying to put a contingency plan together for that. Instead, we got to be respectful.
Yep.
Got to be legal. We're aware of the issue. And it's a multi-million-dollar investment that we have down there right now, and it has been talked about as far as getting something together as far as the islands. It's going to make good vision for a few years from now, but we do have a situation that has to be truly dealt with in a good manner.
absolutely. And I think that's fair. It's always easier said than done. So do what?
Zip line
I love a zip line. Yeah.
with umbrellas.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Those of you that are over in the district, I mean, does it make sense?
Very positive then for me.
Yeah.
You're looking at me, so.
Yeah.
But I mean, I love the, you know, having come from a marketing background, you know, the stack version, you know, I can see it, you know, on banners working so much better than the little tiny, you know, writing for Wausau River District. So I think application-wise, I think it opens up a lot of fun stuff
Good.
for us.
Great.
So, and I like the name because, you know, with Arden's new apartment building, we could call it the River West Apartments and start sort of a basic
Absolutely. Absolutely.
foundation for the brand to kind of take off and grow. So.
Right.
When I started just now, my name is Ben. One of the things that I mentioned is that he can come into the community and see things about the community. But another thing that I was really impressed with today is he was able to take a look at the logo, which I've always loved because I thought it was exciting and everything, and be able to take that and now make it into something that isn't just the saxophone and the wine classical and things, but be able to expand it into 100 different things, and I love the way it looks right there.
Yes, and I think that's actually, it's a testament to a good, well-designed logo. But the thing that's interesting is to a certain degree, it's almost like some of these concepts are anti-branding. You know, I think a lot of times from a design standpoint, a lot of folks that do a lot of corporate branding, they want to design something hard and fast, and consistency is the key, and versatility is the fear of corporate branding. It's like they don't want things to be that versatile. That's the biggest difference between corporate branding and community branding. The thing that is essential in community branding is having that expandability and that versatility, because that is where you earn brand equity through the multiple partners, the multiple uses, the ability to constantly keep it fresh. Those are the things that draw people in. And honestly, I think one of the biggest things that we have to remember is from an overall economic standpoint, the best way that we can convince a local to explore their own home is by making them feel like it's changing right underneath their nose, because their motivation of discovery is virtually non-existent. They live in Wausau. They think they know everything about Wausau. So, being able to have that versatility in your communication system is key to be able to constantly keep it fresh.
I can give a shout out to the awesome umbrella pattern. I love
Oh,
that
cool.
so much. I think there's awesome.
I didn't want to overdo it.
Your umbrella needs to
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's right.